The finale of Daredevil Born Again is now out with an insane ton of events, and the world has only got one question.
Where is Spider-Man?
So let's talk about it. As always, there will be spoilers ahead, so come back after you have watched it.
Karen?
Last week we ended the episode with Matt sacrificing himself to stop Kingpin from getting killed by Bill Poindexter's bullet. We then see the moment when Vanessa hired Poindexter a year before the events of the show to take out Foggy after he'd uncovered something by defending Dumb Benny. Then in the present we see Matt try to convince Heather that Fisk is a dodgy guy, but she isn't having any of it, and we see Kingpin try to kill Matt in order to allow him to declare martial law in New York. Matt however escapes and heads to his apartment, where we see the return of our favourite judge, jury and executioner, and they get attacked by Kingpin's special anti-vigilante task force. Daredevil and Punisher then beat up all of those guys, with Frank brutally killing everyone he comes across. Then we find out who the killer of Hector Ayala was, and it is Cole North, one of the douches in Kingpin's task force. But not too long after, a grenade is dropped into the flat, blowing it up, and Matt and Frank escape and get picked up by Karen. They all reconnect and talk about basically how everything's messed up, and Frank tries to rizz up Karen, but with the Riz Master Matt Murdock sitting right there, it's practically impossible. We learn that Karen was in fact the one who called Frank to help Matt, as she knew that Kingpin would do something stupid once Poindexter escaped. Daniel also basically becomes a mini Kingpin now, and he's just threatening all the people that disagree with Fisk. Matt and Karen decide to try and find out what was in that case that Foggy was defending that got him killed, and it was the fact that the Red Hook port that was being disputed over had no taxes or something like that, and so the Fisks were using that to smuggle stuff legally. So this case would have exposed that, and they would be in trouble. Meanwhile, Frank heads over to the Red Hook port and starts beating up the cops there. However, soon he gets overwhelmed and captured. At the same time, Commissioner Gallo then gets kidnapped and threatened by Fisk before he rips his face apart, and Kingpin blames Gallo's death on vigilantes and uses this as means to declare martial law in New York. Matt on the other hand plans to use the good people of New York to fight back against Fisk. However, Heather joins Fisk's administration as the head of the Committee of Mental Health. And then we see all the people captured by Fisk, including the Pookie Bear Jack Duquesne, and all the other people who have previously disagreed with him, and of course Frank Castle, who in the post-credit scene makes an attempt to escape. This episode was
Just wonderful.
This was literally anything anyone could have ever asked for in a Daredevil season finale, because it perfectly sets up season 2 whilst also filling in loose ends from earlier in the show. Though the only real loose ends left by this episode was why those guys were wearing the Punisher vest and had Punisher tattoos, and we somewhat get an answer, but I think the main answer will be answered in the Punisher special presentation coming soon. However, this is how a finale should end, and I think Marvel have slowly learnt the lesson about underwhelming finales as we saw in previous shows. But then again, the main reason that this finale is so good is that it was pretty much just setting up a season 2 rather than finishing the story that was already being told. So it isn't a completely fair comparison comparing this finale to a finale of a one season show. Also, this episode reminded me a lot of the finale of The Boys season 4, where everything just ends horribly for the heroes and the one person who shouldn't have absolute power ends up getting it. And both episodes were absolute peak, so what can I say? Now the main question obviously is still, where is Spider-Man, since he is probably swinging around the Rockefeller Center for like 2 years within the universe, whilst everything bad that could possibly happen to the citizens of New York happens. Like we had the events of Hawkeye, now we had this where martial law is in effect, and soon the Void will be turning people into shadows. Obviously this is due to rights issues, but it would have been so cool seeing Peter in that bar at the end ready to fight Kingpin's tyranny, though they might explore this in Spider-Man Brand New Day, if Sony allows it. But Spider-Man rant aside, the entire season of this show was good. The reason it's good and not peak was just because it did feel a little weak in the middle few episodes, but it did pick itself right back up in the final 2 episodes. So this episode gets a 9 out of 10 and the whole show gets a 7.5 out of 10. Subscribe and comment below your thoughts.